BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast, where the tractors are back in Westminster.
We'll keep coming as long as we have to. This is massive. We're going to feed England. We're going back to the war days where, dig for Britain.
We'll have more from the protest against changes to inheritance tax on farms later in the programme. First today, Andy and Lynda Eadon started campaigning for better awareness of mental health in agriculture after their son Leonard took his own life 3 years ago. He was 22 and had just finished his agriculture degree. Mental health is a big challenge in farming. In 2019 alone, more than 100 people in agriculture and related trades took their own lives in England and Wales. This week we're searching out rural community champions, those unsung heroes who are making a real difference in their villages and towns. Sally Challoner went to meet Andy and Lynda.
So we've got this field and the one below it. And then the one above is like an L-shaped one across there. All the buildings are surrounded by the land, which is very nice. So we've gone full circle back to the house, so it's time to put the kettle on.
Lynda and Andy Eadon recently sold their farm in Warwickshire and moved to rural Ceredigion in Wales. It's a fresh start, but they're still campaigning for better mental health in farming in memory of their son Leonard.
He was a very caring, very sociable party animal, but he had a heart of gold and he hated knowing anyone had problems or stress in their life. He would sort problems out for anybody if he could.
Yeah, that summed him up really. I mean, what shocked everybody, Len was the one person no one expected capable of taking his own life.
And that is often the case, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. According to Papyrus, 2 out of every 3 young suicides, there isn't really any warning signs. The questions asked after that person has sadly took their life.
It's one of the most difficult things any parent could go through, but they turned their grief into action, setting up a website, Len's Light, which raises money for 3 charities, Farming Community Network, Papyrus and Yellow Wellies. They also give talks, hold events inviting communities to meet and talk, and signpost young people towards help.
The website's very much in its early days. I'm really pleased with it. It was done for us. I've now taken control for my sins, so there's a lot of work for me to do on it.
And you've made... I love this. This is like a credit card sized red card, the 5-a-day challenge, keep yourself safe. Tell me about that.
I just wanted a card with basic details on, just to allow people to look at it or show to friends that can just identify where you are and how you're feeling on any one day.
So you could just get that out, be honest with yourself and those around you, talk openly about daily challenges, care for yourself as well as care for others, contact that person you've been saying you should, plan for the unexpected, make the right choices. That's so lovely. You could just carry that with you.
The idea was that it could go in a wallet, behind a phone, or just easy to just pull out your pocket for your own use or to show to friends.
And I know you're still campaigning. You would like mental health on the curriculum in all agricultural colleges, wouldn't you? Yeah. How are you going to go about that?
Keep on kicking down doors, really, is the short answer. I mean, we have talked to all political parties, and obviously we've just had a change of government and things are very much changing, so we're sort of almost feeling like we're on a back foot and we've got to start again, but we're not going to stop.
Lynda and Andy Eadon talking to Sally Challoner. 10 weeks after the mass rally in London in November, farmers were back in the capital yesterday.
We're not against paying the tax. We prefer to pay the tax from the food we produce, rather than a death tax, which is simply unaffordable and unacceptable.
As many as 1,500 tractors converged on Westminster, with farmers continuing their protest over the government's plan to reintroduce inheritance tax on farms from next year. As we've reported, the government says imposing the tax on farms worth more than £1 million is fair and will raise much-needed public funds. But some farmers argue the move could see family farms put out of business. In a moment, we'll hear from the protest. But not all farmers are in favour of the action. We've been contacted by a tenant farmer. He emailed us and said, I quote, that he's very angry about the protests. He says there are enough loopholes still there for many farms to avoid paying this. He mentions trusts, partnerships and gifting. He goes on to say, we must, in agriculture, open the doors to younger people, look to help drive the cost of land down. This measure from the government will not solve this, but will help. Well, he's not the only one to have raised these kinds of points with us, so let's dig into it with Andrew Wilkinson, Head of Inheritance and Trust Disputes at the law firm Shakespeare Martineau.
Generally, if your farm is worth less than 2.65 million, then with some planning, you should be able to avoid the inheritance tax charge. The problem with that is that it assumes that you've got a husband and wife and a sort of straightforward situation, whereas in fact, in my experience, a lot of farms are not owned as between husband and wife. It's often between brothers, between father and son. So whilst I'm sure there are plenty of farmers for whom with planning the tax charge would be avoided, it's not sort of one size fits all, and it doesn't therefore mean that, you know, if you've got a farm of less than 2.65 million that you'll definitely avoid having to pay inheritance tax.
Well, our listener who emailed us mentioned things like trusts and partnerships. Would either of those actually stop you paying inheritance tax?
Not in of themselves, no. They're worth thinking about and they might help, but it's not a sort of silver bullet, really. They're complex structures and have lots of other things to think about as well as just tax.
Gifting is something else that's been brought up. If you gift a farm and live for 7 years, then there's no inheritance tax due on your death. That sounds like a simple solution. Is it that simple?
The sort of practical challenge I always see with it is the element of control. The joke that I make is that inheritance tax is for people who don't trust their children. And that's sort of the problem, really, which is that people don't want to give up control.
Our listener said that he thinks that the change in inheritance tax is partly a good thing because it could bring down land prices and let newcomers in to farming. Do you think that would happen?
The concern that I have is that there are steps you can take to minimise inheritance tax by the use of planning. And of course, there is still a inheritance tax benefit to holding farmland. So I suppose my concern is that, you know, the sort of serious sort of commercial people who've been buying land and holding it as an investment will take the advice, will be able to set up the structures and will still be enough benefit in holding these assets from an inheritance tax perspective to retain them. So I'm not sure that it will have a big impact on values. I'm certainly not seeing it at the moment. There hasn't been a sort of plunge in values because of this announcement.
Andrew Wilkinson. Well, many farmers just want the government to rethink its stance on inheritance tax and keep the current exemption. It's been nearly 5 months since the budget and tractor rallies have continued across the country. Another took place in London yesterday. Charlotte Smith was there. I spoke to her from the protest.
Well, here in London, it is a bitterly cold and wet day, but actually that has done nothing to put farmers off coming here. I'm on Whitehall at the moment. There are stationary tractors, 6 abreast, the entire length from Trafalgar Square right down to Parliament Square, and you may be able to hear some beeping in the background. That is the tractors queuing in Trafalgar Square, trying to park up. It's a much bigger protest than ones that have been held here before. Organisers say they're expecting something in the region of 1,500 tractors.
Wow, 1,500 tractors. Are they getting noticed?
Yes, very much so. I mean, obviously, this part of London is quite a touristy part of London, so there are a few bemused tourists wandering around, but also a lot of just people out for their lunch or whatever who are taking photographs and very much asking what farmers are doing. Farmers are very keen to explain why they're here and that they will be back if this doesn't work.
Hopefully it's the impact of keeping it in the news to make everyone aware that it's going to be fundamentally very, very hard on all the farmers. So we just need to keep it in the news, keep everybody aware that the future needs us, and we've just got to make an impact now.
His way of making a point on it.
We've had demonstrations all over the country, including here in London. It's not really working. They're not changing their minds.
Well, it's just only going to get bigger and better from here, though, isn't it? Every 10th of a month till they change their mind.
We're keep coming as long as we have to. We really do. So this is massive. We're going to feed England. We're going back to the war days where, dig for Britain.
You've come up for this protest, and yet you're not a farmer. So why are you here?
Absolutely. So we're machinery dealers, Haynes Agricultural, covering the south-east of England. And we've got to support the farmers, because without the farmers, there's no machinery dealers.
Have you noticed a difference since the budget in what people are spending with you?
Absolutely, yeah. Everyone's just tightening their belt because they don't know what's going on with this government. It's a knock-on effect for everyone.
We've been here before. I mean, I've literally stood here before talking to farmers. What happens if these sorts of protests don't work? What's next?
To be honest, don't know. Couldn't tell you. I don't know where it goes from here. We're just hoping something changes, I suppose.
Well, as we heard there, farmers say they will not give up on this. So, Charlotte, what's next?
Well, that's a very good question. Obviously, we've spoken fairly recently in the last 2 weeks to the Secretary of State for the Environment, Steve Reed. He is equally adamant that nothing about this policy is going to change. So when I spoke to Liz Webster from Save British Farming, who organised this demonstration, I asked her what happens now.
We really feel that we've won this argument, actually. The government are looking more ridiculous, I think, in their position. And I think people are beginning to understand it much, much more now because it's in the news really all of the time.
The government, though, have made it very clear nothing about this policy is going to change.
Yeah, I remember Margaret Thatcher saying similar things about the poll tax.
So you think that these protests and the ones that we've seen up and down the country are making a difference?
Well, of course they are, because everybody knows that farmers are unhappy and they're beginning to ask why. And then they realise, actually, this matters to me because it's about my food. And that's what we're trying to do.
Plenty of people, though, will say farmers are rich. To be affected by this tax, you have to be a millionaire. And it's fair enough that they, like other people with assets on their death, have to pay inheritance tax.
Yeah, we'd like to be able to pay inheritance tax. We, for years, for decades, have worked at very low wages. Also, often you don't make any money because you know that your asset is there and you can pass it on to your children and the farm survives. But now, with this inheritance tax, many farmers are facing a horrible decision.
If nothing changes after this protest, what's next?
I hope to do something a bit different, a bit gimmicky in the summer. And if they haven't changed, the budget will be looming and I'm sure we'll be back.
Liz Webster there from Save British Farming talking to Charlotte at the rally in London. Well, after the rally, a debate was held in Westminster Hall discussing a petition signed by more than 150,000 people asking for an end to the inheritance tax decision. 49 MPs requested to speak and the debate was attended by many farmers who'd come down for the rally. And tomorrow we'll be hearing from the Farming Minister, Daniel Zeichner. That's all from us. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Heather Simons. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.